Hello and welcome to another edition of Iridium Rock and Metal Reviews. Thanks to everyone that's been commenting on my videos. Really appreciate it. I've had some really good recommendations for bands I'd actually never got to hear back in the 80s, and that's brilliant. It opens up a whole new thing for me. I love listening to new music. So that's brilliant. Keep them comments coming. Remember, this is my favourites from that year. So, like I've said before, it's not about the most popular one, the one that was at the top of the charts, the one that sold the best, the most technical. It's my favourites and what means the most to me. Please put your favourites down the bottom of my video, especially on YouTube. Really appreciate it. Although I've got been getting a lot of comments on the Facebook pages that I share too as well. So that's great as well. So, end of an era, 1980s. We did put the last video on this morning, so now we're going to the 90s. So a real shift, as you know, all you guys who are into heavy rock and metal, you know, there's a big shift in music in the 90s. But still, some of the 80s bands were releasing some good releases at this stage. So I'm going to, out of this 1990, yet again, more than 5. I came up with 7 that I couldn't. What it is I come up with a certain amount. I try to stick to 5, but I just can't, because there might be a couple more, 1 or 2 more or 3 more that I just can't leave out. So today there's going to be 7 in 1990, and some really good honourable mentions as well. So I'll go from number 7, which is my least favourite of my favourites. So all these 7 are, for me, they're brilliant, mean a lot to me, these albums. But go from 7 to 1. Number 7 being my least favourite of those 7. So kicking off, number 7. Now, I'm not really into live albums that much. I probably was a little bit more when I was younger, but studio albums are what I prefer. But this band brought out an album. It was one of my favourite bands, so it was bound to be a hit for me. So number 7 is Tesla 5-Man Acoustical Jam. Obviously, as you can tell by the title, it was an acoustic set. A lot of bands were doing acoustic sets at that time, especially on MTV and stuff like that. But I think this really showcased what they were all about. They've always had that. Tesla have always been different than any of the other bands that come out in the 80s. Their style, what they sound like is they was never like a glam or hair band. They was more down to earth guys, and they showed their sort of, which I like a lot of southern rock, and you can hear some southern rock influences in their music as well, and you can really hear this in this acoustical jam album. I especially like their version of Signs. For me, that's a Tesla song. They made it their own, brilliant version of Signs. Love that song. Yeah, it's for live albums to make it into my top my favourites is, it's a bit of a strange one, but really loved it. Really got into that album at the time. So that's my number 7, 5-Man Acoustical Jam, Tesla, and I'll score that 8 out of 10. This next band took a lot of stick in the 80s. They actually had their career ruined a little bit, as they reckon, by a cartoon, Beavis and Butthead cartoon. Do you remember that? And that's the band Winger, and it's their album In the Heart of the Young. I really like this album, whatever people think about Winger, and some of the stuff they brought out afterwards as well. It's not along the same lines of basic rock. It's very intelligent music. Songwriting's really good. Singer's good, really good singer, Kip Winger. And this album had some real big choruses in this. It came right at the end of the 80s. Obviously, it was 1990, so it was a bit of a difficult time for these sort of bands. But this was, I really got into this album. It weren't their debut, but I think this is their strongest album for me. And the songs on this are Can't Get Enough. These are all really big songs. Choruses are huge. Loosen Up, Easy Come, Easy Go was another big rocking song. And Miles Away, the slow song, ballad, really good, really good. And I'll give Winger In the Heart of the Young 8 out of 10. The next album, my number 5, Pretty Maids, Jump the Gun. This was really good album as well. It was obviously the follow-up to Future World, which was one of my favourite albums of all time, that Future World. It wasn't on the same level as that, but it wasn't that far off. They carried on that momentum, sounded very similar to the Future World album, but just not quite as a lot. There was like half the album was really like excellent, as good as Future World. Then it dropped off a little bit. Yeah, again, like a lot of albums do near the end for me. But some of the songs on here were brilliant. Lethal Heroes kicked it off. And Don't Settle for Less and Savage Heart were huge sounding songs. Yeah, just Savage Heart probably along the same lines of Love Games as that huge sound, like could have been a huge hit for them, a really big hit, but maybe coming at a little bit at the wrong time in 1990. But really love the album, and I'll give Pretty Maids Jump the Gun 8.5 out of 10. Right, and my number 4 is Rat Detonator. You know what, this was a big surprise for me when this came out, because Rat, for me, their albums weren't as good. I think Invasion of Your Privacy was, for me, was the strongest album. And they're Dancing Undercover, I believe, and then it might have been Reach for the Sky after that. And for me, they wasn't as good a quality as the ones before that. And I was sort of losing faith a little bit in Rat. But this is right up there with just behind, I'd say, the two albums, the two Invasion of Privacy and Rat Out of the Cellar. It wasn't far behind, and probably a bit more melodic. Some of the choruses were huge in this, really good. Shame, Shame, Shame was a really good one. One Step Away, what a brilliant catch, what a hook to that. Brilliant melodies. Can't Wait on Love, love that one. And Giving Yourself Away was, I couldn't stop playing that one. Real catchy song. Love Rat Detonator, and I'll give Rat Detonator 9 out of 10. Right, number 3. This is where I started to introduce some different styles of heavy rock and metal into my favourite bands, and this is a really good album, and this is Alice in Chains' Facelift. So this was a bit different than other stuff that was coming out at the time. Obviously a couple of grunge albums did come out at that time, but I honestly never thought Alice in Chains to be grunge anyway, although I've got nothing against grunge music. I thought some of it was good, but this was separate. They were something better than that. They were more along the lines of Sabbathy riffs and stuff like that, more heavy metal for me than grunge. Lane Staley's voice, never heard anything like it before. So much power in his voice. Jerry Cantrell, different sort of guitarist, obviously different style than what we're hearing, like the guitar heroes, if you like, through the 80s, but still some riffs that he wrote and still does to this day. Brilliant guitarist and songwriter Jerry Cantrell. That's why Alice in Chains is still good today, because of him. And some of the songs on here, you know, some of them are as strong as albums to come for them. But yeah, again, for me, there was a few not so good dotted around on the album, and that's why it's not my number 1 probably. But the track We Die Young, what an opener that is to your debut album. Wow. A few more. Man in the Box is obviously the most well-known song on this album. For me, it's not one of my favourites off the album, but I still like it. I think it's still good. It Ain't Like That is really good. Confusion, one of the underrated songs, or not so well-known songs from Alice in Chains. Love that one. Absolutely love it. So yeah, Alice in Chains' Facelift. What an introduction to a great band. And I'll give that 9 out of 10. So number 2, Lynch Mob, Wicked Sensation. This was a real shock to hear this album. So Dokken broke up. George Lynch went, what a guitarist, brilliant guitarist, went and formed Lynch Mob. And they brought something completely different to the table than Dokken, obviously. I love Dokken, but he completely took it in a different direction. it was more heavy rock, more heavier, probably a bit more bluesy, rock and roll, but really heavy at the same time. The track Wicked Sensation, wow, what an opener, what that riff at the beginning. Some of my favourites on here are Sweet Sister Mercy, love that song. Rain, No Bed of Roses, Through These Eyes, what a track, what a classic sounding track. For a Million Years is another one off here. Really love this Lynch Mob album. Thought it was great, really great. And he excelled himself really, George Lynch, on this, to show that different side of him. Absolutely brilliant, what a guitarist. And I'll give Wicked Sensation 9.5 out of 10. So that comes to my number one of 1990. You might have guessed it already, they've been mentioned quite a few times on the other years through the 80s, and that's Queensryche and their album Empire. Really got into this album. This was a big hit for them as well. Obviously the Silent Lucidity track that came off of this, I believe it was a big hit, especially in America. It put them at the forefront really. But yeah, again, I think maybe it was a difficult time for the band after this, during the grunge era and stuff. So, but no, this album, the production as well, what a clear production that brought everything in the mix. Every instrument on this was right bang in the mix, and you can hear that on songs like especially the Thin Line, the bass in that and the guitar in Jet City Woman, Another Rainy Night, the title track Empire, really heavy track, really heavy, kicks in like real heavy from the beginning to the end on that one, and it closes with Anybody Listening. What a track that is. They were still top form for me. I don't think this was just a little bit of a step below Operation Mindcrime and Rage for Order, but it weren't far behind. Them three albums, Mindcrime, Rage for Order, and this one, they'd be near the top in my all-time lists anyway, of albums. Queensryche, what a great band, and I'll give Empire 10 out of 10. So that's my top 7 done. Some honourable mentions. There's a few here that nearly made it. I was toying with getting in with the rest of them albums, but didn't quite make it. I think some of it is to do with staying power. I might have listened to them big time at the time, but them other 7 that I've just mentioned, I still listen to them now. And I think that's the difference. Some of these ones that I'm going to mention, at the time, if you asked me what my top 10 was or whatever, they probably would have been in there, but they haven't had the staying power for me. One of them is the Extreme album, Porno Graffiti. I really got into it for a few years, but I haven't listened to it. I listened to it the other day, but just for this list I'm doing now, but and enjoyed it. But I don't know, it really gripped me at the time, but doesn't anymore as much. But it's still a good album. Judas Priest, probably my favourite album of theirs, and a lot of people's as well. Painkiller came out. The Painkiller track is, what a track that is. I mean, if you ever, someone says to you like, an alien came down and said, can you explain what heavy metal is, you're probably playing Painkiller, wouldn't you? It's just got everything you want in it. The guitar solos are mental in this, and there's about 3 or 4 I think, and it just, the track is just absolutely pounding. Bit of thrash, it's probably a bit close to thrash metal as you can get, and they were, because 1990 was a lot of thrash around then, I think they tried to, they did songs that were fast before that, but I think this album, it fitted in really well with what other bands were doing as well at the time. Really good. Yeah, Megadeth, which this is my favourite album of theirs as well, Rust in Peace. Back then I wasn't too keen on Dave Mustaine's voice. I quite like it now. I think it really suits the music. But I wasn't really into Megadeth as much then. I listen to them more now than I did then. But this was a really good album, Rust in Peace. This would be on a lot of people's top 7, this one, and I in fact liked some of their later music, what was to come from this band, although this was really good as well, and it adds what it in its Pantera's Cowboys from Hell. Now with this album, there's some really good standout tracks, you know, but the rest of the album not so much. Later on in their career, for me, they had solid albums all the way through. So that's probably why it didn't make my top 7, but I'm sure it will do a lot of other people. You had another one that's I loved at the time, hasn't stuck as much to me now, but it's Slaughter, Stick It To You. Really liked this at the time. This is the Mark Slaughter who left the Vinnie Vincent band, or was kicked out or whatever, and he formed his own band, and this was a big hit for him actually, Stick It To You. I really liked that at the time, good one. And British band Thunder, Backstreet Symphony. This was their debut album. This was a really good album as well, solid, strong album. Didn't quite make it in my top 7. But a lot of them nearly did. It was a bit of a fight. This is probably the hardest list to decide what's actually going in my top. But no, that's it. So look, I'm really happy that people are wanting me to do more videos. I'll keep them coming. I hope you enjoyed 1990, and please comment. And don't forget, if you want me to listen to something and review it, an album I haven't heard or anything like that, and I've been listening to some music that people have been recommending, I might even do a few reactions as well. All right, I'm going to see how it goes, because I'm going through these years like nobody's business. So right, thanks for listening, and I'll probably catch you next couple of days. Cheers.